you, I'm talking to you. How assertive are you? Do you always stand your ground, or do you often let people push you around? In today's podcast, you'll learn vocabulary and expressions on the topic of assertiveness. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with more than 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. So Craig, how are things? How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. This year has started off fairly well. We're recording this at the beginning of 2024. And I've got some lovely, kind and interesting new students in my conversation groups. So why don't we start by saying how we can help you, especially if you're a new listener, to improve your English. Reza, what do you offer?
I offer one-to-one classes. So the benefit of that is that you can tailor the classes to your needs. We can concentrate on whatever you need to concentrate on. Might be speaking, might be listening, you might need help with your grammar, certain vocabulary areas, or a bit of everything. Whatever, I can hopefully help you with my one-to-one classes.
And we're being very assertive by advertising to you right at the start of this podcast. If you would like to improve your English fluency, your speaking, your general confidence when you're communicating in English, why not consider joining one of my conversation groups? You can find out information on the website at englishcraig.com or just send me an email to craig@inglespodcast.com and I'll send you more information by email. What's first this week, Reza?
Let's start with a voice message from Jose.
Hello, Craig. I'm Pepe from Talavera de la Reina. Now I'm living near Chicago. Here I am working as a teacher with the Visiting Teacher Program. So I encourage teachers to come and try because it's a great experience. I listen to you through your podcast and it helped me a lot to improve my English. I thank you for it and congratulations for your courses. Bye and Merry Christmas.
Well, thank you for your message, Pepe. I did have a look at the website for visiting teachers, the Visiting Teachers Program. Spanish teachers visiting the US and Canada. It looks very, very interesting. I will put a link to that in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/501. If you are a teacher with Spanish as your first language, have a look. It might be an interesting experience to go to a foreign country like the US and Canada and have an experience teaching there.
Sounds great. Sounds really life-changing, Pepe. What a change from Talavera de la Reina to Chicago. That's one heck of a move.
A bit colder in the winter, but wonderful, wonderful place, Chicago. Next, we have a voice message from Ezekiel from Argentina, who gave us the idea for today's podcast.
Hello Reza, hello Craig, how's it going? Here Ezequiel from Argentina, Tucumán. I've just listened your last podcast talking about talking like a native, and you asked us about a recommendation. And I wonder what about doing another episode of Argentina. I listened to your previous podcast talking about Argentina, and it was hilarious, and I loved it because it's like when you're trying to speak like an Argentinian or just trying to speak Spanish, it is really funny. And another recommendation is like talking about assertive and non-assertiveness, like with examples and all that thing. Well, that's it. Hope you have a really good day. Continue doing this podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Ezekiel. We're not going to do a repeat episode about Argentina, but we are really pleased that you enjoyed the one we did do. So thank you for that. I'm going to be quite assertive and say to you, Ezekiel, to remember the two after listen. It's listen to something. So you'll have listened to the podcast for quite a while. Any comments, Reza?
Yes, Ezekiel, I say the same as Craig with certain assertiveness. No, we can't do another episode in Argentina. But I tell you what, if you can think of some particular aspect that could be of general interest to people, which has a connection with Argentina, maybe we could do that, but we can't repeat a whole episode about Argentina. So there means like, well, we're not going to change our mind. Sorry, we're being assertive. We can't, sorry.
That is quite unusually assertive of you. You don't normally talk like that. So thank you, Ezekiel, for your suggestion of assertiveness or non-assertiveness. Let's look at some vocabulary. To assert is the verb, A-S-S-E-R-T, and to assert yourself is to show quite a forceful or confident way of speaking or acting or personality so that you make your message very clear to another person or other people. What's the adjective?
So for the adjective, just add the suffix IVE to the verb. So we've got assertive. And then if you want to change that into a noun, add another suffix to the one you've already got. Add NESS, a typical suffix, a typical ending for nouns. And then you have assertiveness.
So Reza, in which situations do you think it's important for someone to be assertive? Can you think of any?
Well, particularly situations where someone's trying to get you to do something that you clearly don't want to do. Now, sometimes you should do what you don't want to do because it's the best thing to do. Like a doctor telling you to eat less fat or whatever. You don't like it, but you should follow his advice. He's a doctor. But someone telling you to do something you don't want to do, but it's not for your own benefit, that's when I think you need to be assertive and say, hey, no, I'm not going to do what you want. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Also, I was thinking maybe anything to do with bureaucracy, red tape when you go to an office to do something. Sometimes it helps to be assertive so that you can get done what you went there to do. And instead of saying, oh, yes, 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 and walking out without being persistent and assertive, then maybe you can't get things done. And also if you're being cheated, if someone is trying to con you, cheat you, overcharge you, charge you too much money, being assertive and checking the price and making sure that you're not being cheated, I think it's important in that situation to be assertive.
Craig, what about some vocabulary related to assertiveness? Some adjectives for starters. For starters means to begin with. For example, I think the compound adjective, that means two words joined together, self-assured. So take the word self, put a little hyphen in the middle and add assured, is a very useful word to talk about being assertive. If you're self-assured, you're sure of yourself. You know what you're doing.
Another compound adjective, self-confident. If you have confidence in yourself, you are a self-confident person. You believe in yourself. I believe in my ability to be assertive, for example, to believe in yourself.
If you take that up a level, you might say that you're determined. That's even more than believing in yourself. If you're determined to do something, you are absolutely going to do it no matter what happens. So even if you discover later that it might not be such a great idea, you're still going to do it. So that's being even more than self-assured, to be determined to do something. You could also say resolute, a slightly more formal version of determined. You have made a resolution and you are going to do it.
At this time of year, you might have made some New Year's resolutions. That's the noun, a resolution. So how are they going? How are you doing with your resolutions? How resolute are you being with your New Year's resolutions?
Are you being uncompromising? So if something is compromising, it's negotiable. But if your attitude is uncompromising, it's not negotiable. So if you decided absolutely no chocolate from Monday to Saturday, but only a little bit on Sunday, are you sticking to that? Or are you breaking the rules? Are you having a little bit on a Saturday evening? No, you shouldn't do that. You've got to be uncompromising. If you said one piece of chocolate, tiny piece on a Sunday, that's it. Craig, can you see yourself resolutely sticking to that promise?
Absolutely not, because I don't have, when it comes to chocolate, I don't have the willpower. My will, my desire not to eat chocolate is not strong enough. So if you are a strong-willed person, you're resolute. You do what you say you're going to do. You have the will to do something or not to do it. So there's another compound adjective, and these are all in the show notes, inglespodcast.com/501, a strong-willed person. Would you say you're strong-willed, Reza?
Fairly strong-willed. I'm not the greatest example, but I'm not bad. Not bad, I think. Another useful characteristic to have if you want to be assertive is boldness.
No hair.
Not baldness, to be bald, no, but to be, the adjective is bold, B-O-L-D. The more formal word would be audacious. Suddenly the Spanish speakers understand easily because it sounds like your word. To be audacious, to be bold. Sometimes you got to take a risk to be assertive. You got to say something which may cause problems, may get you into trouble. It may be a bit risky, but if you don't do it, you might not get anywhere. So you've got to be bold to be assertive sometimes.
One way to remember the meaning of bold is to think of text when you're writing on your computer. Bold text is very black, it's very strong, it stands out. So when you bold text, make it blacker, then it's stronger. And if you connect that image in your mind to boldness, you can remember what it means.
Now, physically, an image I think of someone being assertive more than someone being passive is to be standing. To be standing upright, straight, it's quite an assertive posture. Whereas someone sitting doesn't look quite so assertive. So we have a few expressions related to this. To stand your ground means you're being assertive. You've decided a place where you're going to stand and you're not going to move from there. Yeah, you're standing up for yourself is a similar idea. Or you're standing up for your rights, what you're entitled to. So all of those expressions with the word stand convey an image of assertiveness.
Bob Marley.
Stand up, stand up.
Stand up for your rights. Not to take it sitting down. So obviously that's the opposite of standing up. If you stand up for your rights, you're being very assertive, very strong, strong-willed. But sitting down is more passive. So don't take it sitting down. Your boss is treating you really badly. He's forcing you to work on Saturdays. He's making you work long hours. Don't stand for it. Don't take it sitting down. Respond. Say something. Be assertive.
Indeed, many assertive people prefer to be their own boss. If you are your own boss, well, it could mean literally that you're self-employed, so you don't work for anyone. But metaphorically, as an idiom, it means that you don't like to take orders from people. You assert yourself. So if I say to you, be your own boss, don't let your friends tell you what to do. Stand up to people. Give your opinion. Be your own boss.
So I'm looking at Reza here on the other side of our podcasting desk, and I can see that he's wearing trousers. Now, if you wear the trousers, that means you're the boss. That means you're assertive. You say what happens in a team, in a relationship. You're wearing the trousers. Do they say that in American English? He's wearing the pants? Because pants are trousers in American English. I wonder if they use that.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if they do or not. By the way, Craig, you've probably got the listeners curious now. You say Rez is wearing trousers. What, aren't you? What are you wearing?
Well, I don't wear the trousers in my relationship. I can tell you that. My wife wears the trousers in our relationship. She's more assertive in our couple than I am.
Would you go so far as to say she's domineering?
No, because that's quite negative, isn't it? A domineering person, a person who has a domineering personality, that tends to be viewed as quite negative. Somebody who's always telling you what to do or what not to do, who stands over you and gives you orders. No, she's definitely not that. But I do think she wears the trousers.
And don't confuse, by the way, domineering with the word dominatrix. It's quite a different thing. Anybody can be domineering, but it takes a certain type of character to be a dominatrix, I would say. Dominatrix is something that you can find out about if you listen to our episode about polyamory and swingers, 497. It's a very niche meaning, but the word we're interested in today is domineering. That just means that you like to dominate people. In other words, you're pushy. You push people in a certain direction. Metaphorically, you like to get your own way. You push people to do things that perhaps they don't want to do. So that's more than just assertive. That's taking it a bit further.
And to use push as a phrasal verb, to push someone around, means to order them to do things. That's quite common with children in school, for example. There might be a bully in the classroom, in the playground, who pushes other students around. That's a separable phrasal verb. We've got the object or objects in the middle between the verb and the particle. So if you push people around, you're very bossy, you're domineering, you tell them what to do.
And the person who does that, the domineering one, is pushy. And the victim, the one who does what they're told, the one who obeys, is a pushover. So a person who is easily influenced, or we can also say swayed. To sway is to move. For example, a branch can sway in the wind. It moves from side to side. So a person who's easily swayed or influenced is a pushover. You can push them around.
When I was a kid, my mum used to say to me, Craig, do as you're told. Do as you are told, or there will be no dessert for you. So if you do what you are told, you're very subservient and you say, yes, 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 I'll do it. So you might be a bit of a pushover. To do as you are told, or you might hear to do as you are bid, B-I-D. So to do what people tell you to do.
And from that word bid, we have the noun bidding. B-I-D-D-I-N-G. So if you do as you are told or do as you are bid, that means that you do someone's bidding. Yeah, you are the pushover. The other person is the domineering one if you do their bidding.
Yes, sir. No, sir. Right away, sir. Of course, sir. I will do it. To go with the flow is a common expression. Flow, F-L-O-W. Flow, things that move very gently and smoothly in one direction. Think of a river flowing down to the sea. So if you go with the flow like a river, you're very flexible. You don't fight against things. So you don't swim against the current, you could say. The current is the force of the river as it moves along. You don't swim upstream. You don't go against the current. You go with the flow, which is, I think, quite a nice way to move through life, as long as you're not a pushover.
In other words, if you go with the flow, you're a flexible person. But sometimes, if you want to be assertive, you have to be inflexible, to not go with the flow, to not bend. B-E-N-D, to bend, to curve. Yeah, sometimes you got to be straight. Yeah, there's no curve, no bend in your attitude.
So now that we've looked at some vocabulary, let's see if you are an assertive person. We've got some situations for you here. But before we look at those situations, Reza, do you consider yourself an assertive person?
It depends on the situation. I've noticed something about myself. It sounds a bit self-centered to say this, like I've analyzed myself. It's not really that. I've just noticed it, that I respond very much depending on the other person. So I find that I am very assertive with assertive people, and I am very flexible with flexible people. I really respond very negatively to people being bossy with me. I go out of my way to be as difficult as I possibly can with people like that. I'm determined not to be a pushover. So if somebody does get bossy with me, I will be as negative and as put up as many obstacles as I can possibly think of to them getting in their way. Yet if somebody is really humble and flexible with me, I will go out of my way to be the same with them. That's the way I swing. That's the way I do it. What about you?
Yeah, I'm similar. I don't think I'm quite as extreme as that, but I do see what you mean. If somebody is very, we could say, cantankerous, that means they're very obstinate and they like to pick fights or be too bossy with you, then I tend to rebel against that and stand up for myself. But let's see with some specific examples how assertive we are and how assertive you are. So here's the first one. If you're in a group of people, do you usually make decisions when you're with a group?
It depends on the circumstances. If I feel that I'm definitely the best qualified person, for example, if it was me and a group of 5 other people who didn't know Valencia at all, and we're in Valencia and they want to go to a restaurant, I might make a few suggestions, and imagine somebody sees something on their smartphone about a place to go, and they say, oh, why don't we go to this place? And I might be quite assertive, say, no, it's not very good. I don't think we should, because I know that place and the place I'm thinking of is better. They've never been to Valencia before. I know Valencia well. So in that kind of situation, I might be quite assertive, but for everybody's good. But if I was one of the people who didn't know a city at all, I would keep quiet. I wouldn't be assertive at all, because I wouldn't want to show up my ignorance. That's kind of the way I work. What about you?
The same. I would behave in the same way. And then the person who doesn't know Valencia would say, yes, but on TripAdvisor, it's got a really high score. Let's go there. Then I would say, okay, because there's no greater teacher than experience. So if it's a bad place, well, yeah. So I do go with the flow sometimes. So we mentioned before that some people in relationships wear the trousers. Would you say, thinking of typical relationships between husband and wife, for example, who would tend to wear the trousers, generally speaking?
Well, the classic stereotype going back centuries is that the man wears the trousers, not just physically, but metaphorically. But I'm not so sure it's true. I'm not sure it's ever really been true. It's the public image which is most acceptable. People find it intrinsically funny that a woman is incredibly bossy all the time in public with her husband. It doesn't happen that often. But I think behind the scenes, it's quite often the case. For me, the sex of the person is irrelevant. There's kind of the face which people like to give in public, and then the other face that happens in reality. I think it's kind of irrelevant. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends on the relationship, and many relationships that seem to be one of male dominance, that the man is more assertive, very often, as you say, behind the scene or behind closed doors, it's the woman who wears the trousers but lets the man think that he wears the trousers, because women, I think, are very, very intelligent in that way. So even though the major decisions of the house are generally made by the female, the man thinks he's in charge, but really, we know he isn't.
And what could be more intelligent than that?
Yeah.
Making you think you're in charge whenever you're not. That's very intelligent.
And this is why we should have more women in power as presidents, as prime ministers, because I think the world would be a lot more peaceful if we had women in power positions.
Craig, let's think of a few hypothetical situations. Let's see how you would react. Let's see how assertive you would be. What would you do if someone asked to borrow something that you did not want to lend?
Ah, yes. Well, it depends, first of all, who was doing the borrowing. Obviously, you lend to someone, you borrow from them. So who's borrowing from me and what are they borrowing? So if I thought the person would take good care of the thing, then of course I would have no problem lending it and saying yes. Although if I didn't trust the person to take care of what I was lending, I'd probably make an excuse and say, oh, I'm sorry, I need that. What about you?
The same. It depends on who's going to be borrowing the object completely. But I've got a second step to the same situation. So let's say you have lent something, then it's time to get that object back again. It's happened to me. I don't know if it's happened to you. The following. What would you do if someone denied? That means they said no, they didn't know anything about it. Someone denied ever having borrowed something from you that you now want back. So you definitely lent it to them, but they can't remember. Or they say they can't remember, and they say, no, you never lent me that. I don't have to give you anything back because you never gave me anything. How assertive would you be in that situation?
Well, that has actually happened to me because years ago when we had DVDs, do you remember DVDs to watch films? I had a friend who was sick and he couldn't leave the house, and I lent him about 15 of my favorite DVDs. And then he didn't return them. He moved house. And when I asked him about them, he said, no, you didn't lend me any DVDs. I said, yes, I did. And if Jesus is listening, come on, Jesus, you have got them somewhere. Give them back. It's time.
Is he still a good friend?
Yes, he is.
So he genuinely forgot.
It slipped his mind. He forgot. Now, what would you do, Reza, in the situation where your boss or maybe a colleague, another teacher, called attention to you, said something to you in an aggressive or unfair way? This has happened to me several times. What would you do in that situation where publicly, in front of other people, your boss got very aggressive with you?
Oh, well, if it was in public, I wouldn't want to make too much of a scene. So to make a scene means to draw even more attention to something. I would probably have a facial expression. Yeah, I'd make some kind of movement with my eyes or my face or my forehead to show that I didn't like it. But I would let it go the once. Yeah. If they did it a second time, I would say something back very, very aggressively. But the first time I would let it go, but I would probably use my body language to show that I hadn't liked it. What about you?
Well, in this situation, and it has happened to me twice with colleagues, ex-colleagues, and once with an ex-boss at a different language school, and I did not stand up for my rights. I did not stand up for myself. I didn't stand my ground. I was very unassertive and I just said nothing. And I regret that. I think I should have been more assertive in that situation and I should have stood up for myself, but I didn't. So maybe I'm not very assertive.
What about if your boss suggested meeting you unofficially at his or her house, let's say her house, in your case, Craig, at her house to discuss your future with the company, but you got to meet her unofficially at her house. She's probably going to give you a drink. No one else is going to be around. that kind of situation, not during working hours, perhaps at the weekend. How would you react to that situation?
Well, that sounds very suspicious to me. I mean, why not have that conversation in the office? Why make it outside of office hours? No, I probably would be assertive and say, well, let's have the conversation now. What would you do?
Well, this is a terrible confession. I'm so
Say
shocked.
yes.
It depends what they look like.
That's not right. So how can you say
How
that?
can I possibly say that? If I found my boss incredibly attractive, I would probably show up at the house. I don't know.
Really? Really?
If I didn't, then that would be much harder. That's the bit that, would be tricky if I didn't find them attractive.
You are morally corruptible.
No, I must say I'm joking. I'm joking because even if I did really fancy, that means to find someone very attractive. If I really fancy my boss, I still wouldn't turn up because you're asking for trouble if you get involved romantically with your boss because they have the power. Not a good idea. I would, in a very respectful way, try to get out of it. I wouldn't just say, oh no, there's no way I'm going to meet you in your house. I wouldn't be that assertive. I wouldn't have the guts. I wouldn't have the courage. I would say, oh no, I'm very busy this week. I don't think I can. I'm awfully sorry.
It's one way to get a rise.
Indeed.
Next situation, a mugger. Now, a mugger is a person who approaches you, usually in the street, with maybe a weapon, with a knife, with a gun. To mug someone is to steal from them in the street with the threat of violence. So if a mugger asked you to hand over, to give them your wallet in the street, what would you do?
It very much depends on the circumstances. It depends on the physique of the mugger. Is it a big, strong guy with lots of muscles, much taller than me? Also, it would depend on how many people are around. Is it a really busy street in the middle of the day in what's regarded as normally a safe city? So if it was in a place where it would be very difficult to escape, a very strong person in a city which is famous for quite violent crimes, I would probably hand over the money, just not risk it. But if it was in a very safe place in the middle of the day with lots of witnesses, I would probably run away. I wouldn't stand up to them in the sense of have an argument. I would just run away, but I wouldn't give them the money. What about you?
I'd probably give them the money. You never know if a mugger is concealing or hiding a knife or a weapon. So just to be on the safe side for my own personal safety, I'd say, take the wallet. I might say, leave me my cards, leave me my personal cards, my health card, my ID card, for example, and just, take the money. Has it happened to you?
The only time I was ever mugged in my life was Valencia.
Really?
In my first or second year here. It was quite late at night. There was nobody around, although it was in the center, but I just happened to find myself in a very narrow street late at night. Nobody was there.
How assertive were you?
I handed over the money because it was the situation that I mentioned at the beginning. The person looked pretty strong and aggressive. There was no way of getting away. They caught me in a street with only very limited accessibility to get in and out. And it was above all what they said. Their honesty was what made me pay the money out. I didn't feel sorry for them at all. They said the following. They said, hey, give me the money. Yeah, hand over everything. I'm a junkie. Yeah, a drug addict. I'm a junkie. I really need that money. I haven't had my dose in a long time and you better give it to me. The honesty, I gave it to them.
Yeah.
I thought, in those circumstances, I'm going to give him the money because he looks really aggressive. He's much bigger than me. He looks strong. And if what he says is true. He's going to do anything he wants. So I did give him the money.
Yeah,
I didn't give him my wallet, but he just asked for money and I gave him money.
Yeah, you can't get more assertive than that. Yeah, you'd have to say yes.
What about that? What about the honesty of it?
Yeah, very honest.
Incredible.
I would have done the same thing in your position.
Craig, what about if a person you were speaking to gave an opinion that you considered racist or sexist? Not necessarily about you, but about other people. Something racist or sexist. How would you react? Would you do anything at all? Or
it depends. It's actually happened to me quite recently. I was with people I didn't really know that well, and it was at the time where the UK Prime Minister at the time of recording this, Rishi Sunak, was about to become prime minister just before he took power. And somebody said, oh, we can't have an Indian person, a non-white person as prime minister of the UK, which is incredibly racist. And I said to him, why? I said, why do you think the colour of his skin would make him a bad prime minister? So I think in some situations I would just ask a question, because although you can't often convince somebody not to be racist or sexist, asking some questions that make them think might help them to come to a different conclusion. So in that situation, I was quite assertive, but I didn't get into an argument, because sometimes arguing over racism, sexism is a bit like arguing about the existence of God. It's an argument you can't win. What about you?
It depends on the circumstances. If I noticed that this person was in the company of friends or acquaintances of him, and they all looked pretty aggressive, had been drinking, and had swastika tattoos, I would probably say nothing at all, because it's pretty clear that he believes that, and all his rather aggressive looking friends do, and I just wouldn't have the courage, I admit it. But if it looked like someone who might be reasoned with, to reason with someone means they might change their opinion, so they might not be absolutely determined to have their way. If it looked like someone that I could reason with, I might make a comment. It depends on the person.
Well, what would you do in these situations? And we've also got one or two more questions in the show notes for you to answer. What would you do, for example, if you saw someone jumping a queue or jumping a line that you were waiting in? What would you do if you were in a meeting at work and a colleague kept interrupting you so that you were not allowed to speak? And maybe you get advice from a partner or boss or a close friend about something that you must do or mustn't do, and you think you should decide yourself and make up your own mind. So have a look at those questions in the show notes and tell us what you think, and we'll see how assertive you are. Again, those questions are in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/501. And Reza, how can people send us voice messages?
Yes, send us your answer to those questions, please, through SpeakPipe. There's a link in the show notes. It's speakpipe.com/inglespodcast. You can record your own voice for up to 90 seconds, then it cuts off. That's our preferred method. But if you want to write, you could send an email to craig@inglespodcast.com or me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
We remind you that this podcast is sponsored in part by mansioningles.com. You can visit the online store and see a selection of courses that you can pay for to help you with your English. Go to store.mansioningles.net.
As always, we'd like to say thank you to our Patreon supporters. In the Patreon scheme, what those people do is donate as little as $1.50 per month. And as a way of saying thank you to them for the donation, we give them instant access to audio transcriptions of the podcast. If you're interested, have a look at the link in the show notes. It's patreon.com/inglespodcast.
And we don't have time to thank all of you individually, but we will say hello, welcome, and thank you to our latest Patreon supporters who have joined us this month. And they are Paula, Porfirio Montenegro, Deborah Lopez, and Isabel Ramon Gonzalez. Thank you to you and to everybody who is supporting us on Patreon.
Craig, what have we got in next week's episode?
We're staying at home next week, and we're looking at some more idioms connected to house and home. So if you want to brush up on your idioms, join us next week for that. Until next time, thank you for listening this week. Have a wonderful week. It's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends so that more people can listen. And the music today was by Hits. The track is called See You Later.